Good morning. I'm back to answer some more questions. I actually have quite a few of them in my inbox this week, so I might not get through all of them, but we'll try. All right. Looking at Rick's big episode from the flagship show, it's probably just me, but it feels like a foreshadow or somewhat a callback to what happened with Beth post-Coda during the whole 17 days thing. Rick has like hundreds of, not thousands of walkers following him as he leads them away. He gets heavily wounded, blows up the bridge, gets found by Anne/Jadis, and taken to the CRM. Beth was stuck at Grady. There was the 800 Walker thing that we apparently didn't get to see post-Coda. TF tried their absolute best to lead them away and bury Beth, but couldn't. Beth probably woke up surrounded by the 800 Walkers and gets taken back to Grady, very likely by Morgan. What do you think? Yeah, you just laid out exactly what I think. I do believe that because Rick and Beth have the exact same arc template. So I believe that's a big part of the reason why they put the sheriff's hat on her in season 4, in 416, which was A. I mean, everyone's always said it's because she's going to, the new sheriff suggests that she's going to be the new leader. And I definitely think that's true too. But I think there was a lot of reasons for it symbolically. And part of it is to show that she has the same arc as he does. And so I go back to, they already knew what her arc was going to be in season 4. Gimple already had it planned out. When they, 401, when they did the Bethyl hug, they already had her arc planned out. They already knew what was going to happen at Grady. They already knew she was going to get shot. They already knew that they were going to take her away for many seasons and then bring her back. And they definitely already knew that her and Daryl were going to be the soulmate couple. Okay, so to say, oh, it was a last-minute decision that they made while filming 507. No, guys, that is just absolute baloney, okay? And this is just another way to prove it. I mean, this is kind of more in hindsight, but the fact that we had so much of this worked out from the spoilers that we did get and the things they did say and the little hints that, like, Nicotero dropped and everything, and then we see almost the exact same template play out with Rick, and they had put the sheriff's hat on her. I mean, people say that we have, we're reading too much into things or we have too much confirmation bias or whatever. And I understand why they say that, but there is, when you have mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence and all of these templates that play out and the patterns are there and we've seen them play out a certain way many, many, many times, that's just way beyond confirmation bias, okay? So it's just something that you got to understand. But yes, I 100% agree with the way that you analyze this, and that is exactly what I think that they were trying to do. And it's not so much that they were trying to match Beth to Rick or Rick to Beth. They're just using the same template for both characters. The details will just be different. So yeah, 100%. And, we could have said the same thing with Rick that we said with Glenn, which was just, if they're really dead, then TD is screwed because that will mean that Beth is dead too. But if they're alive, then that also means Beth is alive. And look at that. Both Glenn in season 6 and then Rick both were alive. And of course, the audience always knew about Rick because in that case, they showed him being taken away by Jadis. But with Glenn, they didn't show it to us, right? So anyway, yeah, just 100%. I agree. And great job laying it out. Don't get me wrong, I've been a TDer since day one and still is, but I've rewatched the scene 100 times today and I definitely think Dawn said, no, I didn't mean to. And that makes no sense because you can't pull the gun out of the holster, point the gun and pull the trigger if you don't want to. But the movement of her lips 100% is no, I didn't mean to. So a couple of things here. I mean, I don't think we can 100% know what she said for two reasons. One, I've looked at it too, and if you look at it thinking she said, no, I didn't mean to, then that's what it looks like. If you look at it saying, no, it wasn't me, that's what it looks like. So there's a lot of bias in how you read her lips. But the other thing is that there are two other things, like two reasons I think that maybe she really could have said, you could be right, no, I didn't mean to. Number one is that it might just be a very big misdirection. Just as I talked about last week how maybe they cut the scene in a weird way where we're actually missing a big chunk of it. They may have purposely had her say something like that to confuse the audience. You know what I mean? And it won't make sense until we actually get what really happened there. It would be really interesting if so there were theories back in the day, and I'm not sure, I'm not saying I do or don't believe them. They were just kind of interesting things to think about. There were a lot of theories that maybe they weren't aiming for Beth, that maybe they were aiming for Rick. And Rick only because he was the leader, and he was the one they were trying to take out, thinking if they took out the leader, then they could keep the rest of his group here or something like that. And the only reason people thought that is because Beth steps up to Dawn and then gets shot. So it's almost like they were aiming for someone else, but because she steps to the, does she step to the right or the left? I think she steps to the right. She just kind of stepped into the path of the bullet. Okay, so I have no idea if that's true or not. There's no way to know. It's all speculation. But that would be interesting. It would be something different. The only thing I would say that doesn't work with is calling her a sacrifice. Because that would really just be an accident that she stepped into. And, it would be them trying to sacrifice somebody else. So I don't know. But it would be interesting. And all I was thinking is that it would be interesting if it was something that Dawn set up, and if she knew that there was going to be a shot. And so she's saying, I didn't mean to, because Beth was not the one she meant to shoot. That would actually be really interesting. But the thing that doesn't jive with that is, the other officer, I want to say it's Shepard, saying it was just about her. We don't really know what she means by that. Most people assume that she means Dawn. Like maybe they were trying to shoot Dawn because they hated her as a leader. And that's why she says it was just about her. It's over now. We're not going to kill you. Leave if you want. Please let's not get into a gunfight here, And that would make sense. But that would also mean, when you think about that, this is exactly the kind of thing they're not telling us everything about. Let's just say that what I laid out was the case. That does mean there was another shooter, okay, that the officers knew about, and they were aiming for Dawn, and whoever it was just had terrible aim or something and hit Beth instead. Now, I don't know if that's the way that it is, and I'm not even saying that I 100% believe that. Every theory has some holes in it, and it's because we're missing so much information, okay? But if that was the case, it does prove that Dawn did not shoot her, and somebody else did. Now, that alone would not prove that Beth is coming back, but it does prove that they're lying to us because they keep trying to tell us that Dawn is the one that shot her, so they're hiding things, right? On the flip side, if that officer was not talking about Dawn and saying it's just about her, does that mean they were trying to shoot Beth and it was just about her? That actually more lends itself to the idea of Beth being a sacrifice, but it still suggests that they did it on purpose and there was a different shooter. So this is what I'm saying. We do not have all the information. So whatever Dawn said, I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It does matter, and it's really interesting. It'll be interesting to find out. I wonder if when they tell us everything about what happened, if they'll go back and, because in that scene, the way that they put it together, even if you put on the subtitles, it doesn't say what she says. It says no audio, because it's all silent. We don't actually get audio, so we don't know what she said. But it'll be interesting if they give us that scene again and they give us the audio, so that'll be really interesting to see. But either way, whether she said this or said something else, I just think we can't use that as absolute evidence of what did or didn't happen because, like you said, it doesn't make any sense either way. And yeah, we just kind of have to wait and see what they show us eventually, and hopefully it'll be really soon. What's up with Daryl and Michonne in season 4? They kind of seem flirty with each other, smiling and stuff. And I remember seeing in some interview Norman saying he wanted the writers to pair him with Michonne. Also, I was rewatching S4 and the Emerald scene really caught my attention. What does it signify? So Galadriel Jones just did a really cool meta on this. It's actually about Daryl's arrows. So I will link it in the show notes so that you can go to it. But it's the first part of her Daryl's arrows part where she very much traces his journey, his character journey, through the way that his arrows and his knocks change color. And it's a super cool meta. She's only done the first 2 parts, but she's going to do more. And I'm really loving the connections that she's making. But she does talk about the green jasper scene. And her theory is that Michonne knew that, like, they are friends. And I understand why it seems kind of flirty, but I think it's more like she's teasing him. And we do kind of see that. We don't see it for several years because they don't have very many scenes together. But it's the premiere of season either 10 or 11. I'm getting them mixed up now. So it's probably 10 because it was right after Rick left. It's when they're doing the fighting on the beach and then the Whisperer mask shows up. And him and her are just walking on the beach talking, and he says, I know an asshole who would have loved this, and he means Rick, and then she like punches him in the arm and they're both laughing. So I think they just they do goof around together, and it may seem flirty, but I think it's just the way that their friendship is. But anyway, Galadriel Jones, her theory is that Michonne actually knew that Daryl kind of had a crush on Beth, because the green jasper he picks up, he says it's for this other person to put on her husband's gravestone. And that very well may be true. I mean, we never actually see this person or see him give it to anybody, but Beth wears earrings that are that same color. And so she thinks that the writers might have been hinting a little bit that, whether he was taking it to this other person or not, she's thinking that maybe he's getting it for Beth because she wears that color a lot. And so she's kind of teasing him about it. And I've always thought that part, whatever was actually happening in the episode, the green jasper that he picks up was very representative of Beth, because after that we see him in the car staring at it like his life depends on it or something, and it's kind of strange. Why would he be staring at a rock that way? But it's symbolic of the fact that he's falling in love with Beth. So anyway, go check out that meta. I will link it in the show notes, but it's a really, really good one. And that might help shed some light onto why, because I know exactly which scene you're talking about with her saying that it brings out his eyes and everything, but I don't think that's her flirting with him in a romantic way. I think that's her teasing him and maybe sort of asking him, is that for somebody special, without actually asking him that, And it's just no coincidence that the writers would put something like that in right after we had the Bethyl hug in 401. Like there's a pattern there of them trying to get us kind of thinking about Daryl's love life, whatever that's going to be. And then, of course, in 408, him and Beth end up alone together, and then we go into the second season. I mean, it's not a coincidence that all of that's happening in the same season. So anyway, check out that meta, and I think you'll like it a lot. So here's a color ask. I've watched Daryl Dixon 1-1 several times, and in the scene where Daryl is eating and Laurent is across the way mimicking him, we see Daryl for a bit with right leg propped up and focus on red shoelace. Seems intentional to me. If intentional, your take on the color red. P.S. During the Daryl Dixon panel last fall, Norman at one point had his pant leg hiked up a bit, revealing a red sock. I'm probably stretching here. No, you may not be stretching. I think they do stuff like that. I mean, there's no way to know from one event to another outside the show if they're doing it intentionally. I do think a lot of times they are, but then other times they may not be, and we're reading too much into it. So there's no way to tell from one thing to another what is and isn't supposed to be a hint. Red is a hard one to pin down. So my take on it has always been that it means death, or, blood. That's what it kind of, obviously, the obvious interpretations for the color red. But it's often paired with green, and I think green represents resurrection. So death is not always a bad thing, or at least not in the long run. Like, you have to have death in order to have resurrection. And so that's why we see the red and the green paired together so much. Actually, I think in the Daryl's Arrows post that I just mentioned, Galadriel Jones talks about red, and it's similar. She doesn't talk about death. She just talks about it's a warning for bad stuff coming. But remember that we saw the red garment in Beth's cell in 401, and I believe that was a hint at her coming arc. And I don't mean the arc throughout the entire show and her coming back. I mean, her arc would have started in 401 and it ended, we were talking about theme music the other day. I need to go back and see when the arc actually ended, because the theme music still played after Coda. I think it might not have played after 509, and so we just had one more episode before the end of the arc, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I need to go back and check. Anyway, but that was her first arc on the show, and then she was going to be gone for several seasons. That was actually the last time we saw her on the show, was in Tyrese's death hallucination. So we didn't see green in the cell, we only saw red, and I think that's to show that this arc was not going to end well. It was going to end in blood, it was going to end in her apparent death. But then when you see red and green together, they can represent death and then resurrection. They can also represent being separated from someone and then reuniting with them. So just something along those lines. And everybody interprets it a little bit differently. But we do see the red shoelaces quite a bit. And I think that Galadriel Jones could really be onto something there, that it's a warning that something's coming. That's not good. The red is not a happy-go-lucky color, right? We see this in the apples sometimes. So a really good example is that let's see, what's the episode? 6:15 maybe? Okay, it's when Daryl takes off to kill Dwight because Dwight killed Denise. Anyway, at the beginning of that episode, Rick and Michonne are in bed. They're waking up, and they have an apple, and they both take a bite of it. People are reading all kinds of things into that, Eden symbolism. But the red apple, it is a red apple. And I think that mostly what that represents is the two of them getting separated, because we had the foreshadow of the two of them being separated eventually. We also saw it in 7/12. So it wasn't happening for a few seasons. But the red apple represents the two of them being separated for a while, and maybe even the fact that she thought Rick was dead. When we see green apples, it's usually the reunion going on. But sometimes we see them together too, which I think just shows that we're having something about an arc where there is a separation and a reunion, or there is an apparent death, but then they're actually alive, something like that. Another time that I always remember that we saw this was in, man, I'm having to remember episode numbers today, in 6:07, I think. No. Yeah, it would have been. So it was during Glenn's death fake out, right? In 6:03 is when he apparently, everyone thought he died, and then he returned in 6:07. But maybe it was before that. Okay, don't quote me on the episode number. But when the tower falls, right, and all of the walkers come into Alexandria, and Maggie almost gets eaten, right? She has to get up on top of that scaffolding. And when she's climbing up, we see a red and green together because she's got red shoelaces, but then there's like this random green cord hanging down. And they very obviously show us the shot where we can see her red shoelaces and the green cord. And I believe that just represents that we're in the middle of one of these death fake out arcs. You know, Glenn is thought to be dead, and the green cord shows that he is going to be alive. He and Maggie were separated, in that case, for a very short time. It was only a matter of not even a couple of days, but in terms of the show, it felt like a lot longer because it was several episodes and several weeks. But she did think he might be dead, and then as it turned out, he was alive and they were reunited. So anyway, that's kind of my take on the red, and I think that it encompasses a lot of things and that the writers use it for a lot of nuances. That's why it's so hard to pin down. We never know if maybe they are specifically saying there's going to be a death or if it's going to be a death fake out. With the Maggie example, we didn't know if that was referring to Glenn, or does that mean that Maggie's going to have a death fake out arc? Like, you usually don't know. And I think they use it in different ways specifically to throw us off. So it's really, really hard sometimes to figure out exactly what it means, but I think it's something along those lines. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, I am going to stop there for today, and I will be back with more tomorrow.